We are coming up on 3 minutes away from liftoff. We should be hearing that we're closed out of prop load on the ship at this point. Booster coming up shortly.
Just about 2 minutes and 45 seconds from T0 with a lot of objectives for today. The booster, the Super Heavy booster flying today, will be flying for its second time. Last flight was on flight 7 and just turned around in 2 flights, which is pretty incredible. I'm super excited to see that booster fly again.
All right, we did just hear we are going to hold at T-minus 40 seconds. So we'll pass along some more information once we hear that reason. But again, that's not the end of the day. We can hold at T-minus 40 seconds for quite a few minutes. We eventually have to start looking at our temperature of all of our propellant on board. That's usually what drives us to, if we've held too long, we have to stand down for the day. So we are expecting a hold at T-minus 40 seconds. Sounds like we're going to be doing some additional checkouts on the booster Raptor while we're at that T-minus 40 second mark. So we will expect to see the clock pause at T-minus 40. And then again, we've got a couple of minutes. They can work through the issues. If we're able to clear them, we can still launch today. If it's something that we can't, we can always stand down, turn around, recycle, fly again tomorrow.
Again, that's really important. This is what terminal count is exactly for, is to be checking the vehicle, monitoring the vehicle systems as it makes its way down to T0. And again, this gives us the ability to catch anything and be able to hold, as Dan has been saying, and recycle if we need to, or pause so that we can work through those issues and see if it's something that we need to stand down for. And as Dan mentioned, we will be holding at T-minus 40 seconds, so in about 20 seconds from now.
Yeah, so we'll hold there, and they'll work through these final checkouts on, sounds like just one of those Raptors on the first stage on Super Heavy, which, as you said, we're reflying it for the first time. 29 of those 33 engines have already been used in a launch, one of which has already launched
twice, and will go for
and
its
is getting ready for its
third time.
Right. And you just heard our flight director for the day, Joe Sliker. He just shared that we are going to hold at this T-minus 40 second mark, keeping an eye on one of those Raptor engines on booster. And if you're just now jumping in, we are holding still at T-minus 40 seconds. Watching one engine, waiting for temperatures to kind of get to a zone that we want them to on one of the engines on the booster, on the Super Heavy booster, getting ready for its second ever flight. We'll just continue to hold. Again, we can hang out here for several minutes. We held for a while on the first attempt last time, and then cleared it, and then we triggered a different issue on the ground side.
But again, this is exactly what it's for. This gives us the best chances at success.
And the clock is rolling.
There we go.
All right. T-minus 30. Let's listen in. Watch that first flight proven Super Heavy. Get ready to take off.
T-minus. Out to 1. Hit hold.
We did have a hold, and looks like the clock jumped back to T-minus 40 seconds.
All right, so yep, we jumped out. I did not see the deflector go off. So hopefully we were right at around that T-minus 10 second mark.
And if we were before that T-minus 10 second mark, we do have the ability to recycle, as we mentioned earlier, back to T-minus 40 seconds.
So it looked like this time it was a ground side issue. We're taking a look at this real quick. So again, we're back at T-minus 40. We're gonna hold for a little bit. We are still not scrubbed for the day. Give them a couple of minutes to work through this. Again, we can hang out at T-minus 40 for several minutes. Eventually we start looking at your bulk temperatures and all of your propellant on board the vehicle. We're not actively replenishing the propellant, and so you don't have essentially forever to hang out before things start to warm up. And you do want to make sure your temperature's in a really stable range for a healthy startup on Raptor engines. So they're going to work through this issue. We can continue to hold here for a couple of minutes. What's launch without a little extra added excitement? All right, so cumulatively, we've held for a little over 3 minutes between the two holds. Again, this is a ground side issue on our tower. The techs are looking through the data right now to see if it's something that we can either work through or if it would cause us to have to stand down. So we're continuing to hang out with them, holding at T-minus 40.
If you're just joining us, we did initially hold at T-minus 40 seconds. We continued the count, but recycled before we got to T-minus 10 seconds. And so we're back at a hold at T-minus 40 seconds, waiting for more information. The team is checking out to see if we can continue today. And we're continuing to hold here at T-minus 40 seconds. We've been holding for just about 5 minutes now as the teams evaluate if we can continue to T0 for Flight 9.
All right, so it sounds like we're coming to a resolution. All right, so we are getting to a resolution. We're going to reset everything. All right, so we're going to see the clock. It is now rolling.
Here we go.
We saw an issue with that quick disconnect to the ship. There is a chance that automation will kick us out again if we encounter the same issue. But for now, the clock is rolling. We'll see if we pass around that T-minus 10 second mark. T plus
Booster
40
and ship,
seconds.
avionics
It's
power,
one
telemetry
hell of a
nominal.
sight from here. We see it arcing right over top of us. We see 33 out of 33 Raptor engines lit on Super Heavy as it starts to ascend skyward. Coming up on maximum aerodynamic pressure, then only about a minute and a half until we get into hot staging.
Wow, Dan, that was incredible. We could feel the building shaking here, feel the vehicle's power. Now we're just about a minute away from shutting down those engines on the booster. Again, this booster is flying for its second time today.
All right, so hot staging coming up a little under a minute. We're going to see all but the 3 center engines turn off on the booster. So our version of MECO, most engines cut off. And then just a few seconds later, hoping to see 6 engines ignite on ship to push it away. All right, hot staging, about 30 seconds. And definitely keep an eye on which way the booster flips. First ever directional flip we're going for today. Should flip straight up. See those engines powering down?
Booster engine cut off. Ship ignition. Stage separation.
Incredible flip by Super Heavy booster, and you can see those 6 engines, those 3 engines on the ship ignited.
6 healthy Raptors running on ship on its way to space. Peek that engine view, booster doing the boost back. Chris, how's it looking over there, man?
It is looking
chamber pressure is nominal.
It is looking absolutely incredible here. As we said, 6 healthy engines on ship. We've got 13 out of 13 engines on the booster. Now down to those 3, which is what we expect in the final moments of the boost back burn. Now, as a reminder, we are not recovering the Super Heavy booster today. We are instead going to do
booster
some...
boost back, shut down.
And there we had a good shutdown of the boost back burn. Next up will be the jettison of that hot stage
Ship
ring.
avionics, power, and telemetry nominal.
Great call out there that everything looking nominal aboard the Super Heavy vehicle, which is returning to Earth, and we're going to be doing some experiments with it, including a higher angle of attack re-entry, as well as some engine tests as it gets closer the booster doing its LOX dump, that liquid oxygen dump. So because we don't need some of that liquid oxygen propellant in its tanks, we vent that propellant out to lessen the booster's mass as it comes in for its landing.
Yeah, now as we had talked about, Super Heavy might not have a very smooth ride down. We're going to be putting it through this higher angle of attack. So we're kind of pitching it up a tiny bit, increasing drag. We've done this in wind tunnels. We've done this in computer modeling. It shows that sometimes the control isn't great, but only one way to really prove it out, and that's to get real world data. So here comes Super Heavy. It should be igniting for its landing burn in just about 40 seconds from now.
And we are going to relight 13 engines, then bring that down to 3 engines. As we talked about earlier, we will be intentionally shutting down. We will be shutting down one of those 3 center engines intentionally to push the limits of the Super Heavy booster.
Ship Raptor, chamber pressure is nominal.
And continuing to see 6 healthy engines on the ship, 3 sea level and 3 vacuum engines still ignited as the Super Heavy booster is making its way back down to Earth.
We can see those grid fins doing some heavy work.
Booster landing startup.
Ignited for our landing burn. It may have ended with that landing burn. Does look like we lost telemetry from the booster once we started into that landing burn. Did you hear confirmation that the booster did demise? So the booster's flight ending before it was able to get through landing burn, but again, we are not bringing that back. We were expecting it to make a hard splashdown. We were getting live data back the entire time through that high angle of attack flight, so that was something that was really vital for us to get during this reuse. First free flight of booster in the books. All right, ship has about 2 minutes left.
In about 2 minutes, we expect all 6 Raptor engines to shut down. That will be SECO, basically second engine or second stage engine shut off. And these are some incredible views, Dan, from the aft end of the ship, watching as the engines stay ignited with the Earth in the background.
As always, the Starship avionics team, the techs. I think we just heard the booster. But all right, we got about a minute left into this burn. All eyes definitely on ship as we get through the final stages into its ascent. We're expecting it to start to cut those engines off in about 45 seconds.
Terminal guidance.
All right, just about 30 seconds to go. We're in terminal guidance in the final stages of this ascent burn.
Ship engine cut off.
Ship engine cut off, the 3 most beautiful words in the English language.
And great call out that we had nominal insertion. An incredible flight test so far today. We reflew a Super Heavy booster for the very first time in 9 test flights. Ship is in its orbital trajectory. Again, it's going to remain suborbital for its mission today. But it ignited It ignited all 6 of its engines and made it all the way through SECO just now.
What a moment.
Incredible.
All right, but I mean, that's still lots to come for the rest of this flight. per usual, I need to collect myself. Hey, Chris, how's it going over there?
I think the elation and the excitement and the happiness at what we just saw achieved carried through across all of our sites. What an incredible view to see just under 11 minutes into our mission. Absolutely exciting to see all of this, and super pumped especially to see all of the team's hard work in action here today. As guaranteed, it has been an exciting evening so far. We lifted off a little bit after 6:30 p.m. after a couple of holds that were triggered at the T-minus 40-second mark, but we were able to clear those, one on the Raptor, one on the tower, and we were able to lift off successfully. 33 out of 33 Raptor engines lit on the Super Heavy, all 6 engines lit on ship, bringing it to its planned suborbital trajectory around Earth. But as Dan said, we've got a lot still coming up in our flight sequence. So coming up at about T plus 18 minutes, 26 seconds, we'll have the first deployment of simulated satellites planned. That will be followed at about T plus 37 minutes and 49 seconds by the relight of a single Raptor sea level engine in space. This is going to help us gather data on our ability to do a deorbit burn for future missions that will go orbital. And then, of course, one of the biggest tests yet to come is the new heat shield modification. And that'll start with re-entry into Earth's atmosphere at about the T plus 45 minute mark, which should take about 16, 18 minutes to complete. And now today's re-entry is going to test that heat shield like we said. We purposely took those 100 tiles off over very critical areas of the vehicle to be able to safely test on a flight like this suborbital trajectory into the ocean what might happen on an operational flight in those areas if we were to lose the primary heat shield tile over. Very critical test coming up. And then after that, we'll have the final descent where we will again be pushed to its limits. We definitely pushed the booster to its limits today to gather data, and we're going to be doing the exact same thing on that ship, seeing how the ship handles various flight conditions that we will need it to fly in as we look to one day soon bring ships back for deployment today. As we will see in a few minutes, the primary data and the primary payload for today is the data.
And then before we get there, though, we're going to have to open up that payload deploy door. So we've only ever done that one time before. Pretty sure it was Flight 3. Someone on the internet, please check me. But that was the only time we ever opened it. And we've had simulators on the last 2 flights, but we haven't gotten to this moment yet where we're able to open up the payload door and start deploying these. It's going to be pretty cool. We've got them stacked inside of the payload bay, and we'll have potentially a couple of views. You saw one camera pop up. Oh, there we go. Look inside of the payload bay. You can see them stacked down in the middle of your view. There's kind of 4 on either side, so they're sandwiched on top of each other, a stack of 4 right behind each other. And then we're going to pop the door open. It's on the right side of your screen, so we'll see that open up and then start firing those simulators out into space. Open the pod bay door, Hal.
Now we are expecting the payload door to open any moment now, so we're watching out for that. Again, you're looking at the inside as it's suborbital.
Well, we heard the door open was in progress. It was unable to actuate all the way open, so they are going to close it back up. Hal told me no. He said, I'm sorry, Dan. Can't do that. Looks like we won't get the door open today. But that's okay. This is
why we
obviously
test.
a test we want to be able to do before we're deploying, but the real focus for this, now that we are in space, is getting to that reentry. That is the most critical phase that we still have to prove out. All right, well, so it does look like we're not going to be able to deploy today, but we should have pretty frequent views. We are in darkness right now, so might be a lot of black, but the cool part is when we get to reentry, it's going to be daytime.
Yes, and we did that on purpose so that we can get some live daytime views as ship is returning back to Earth.
All right, so we are going to take a break. Enjoy these views as we get them. Enjoy the tunes. We'll be back in a couple of minutes when we get ready to relight one of those Raptor engines on orbit. See you soon. All right, if you're just tuning in, we are about 30 minutes into today's flight test, and the ship is on its suborbital trajectory. As you can see in some of the views and from some of the telemetry, we are in a little bit of a spin. We did spring a leak in some of the fuel tank systems, which a lot of those are used for your attitude control. And so at this point, we've essentially lost our attitude control with Starship. We are still on a path toward re-entry. We are suborbital, so no matter what, we are going to enter. However, this lowers the chances for it to be a controlled re-entry. Not looking great with a lot of our on-orbit objectives for today, where we were hoping to do the PES deploy and relight an engine, and then really importantly get into that controlled entry to really put the heat shield through the ringer. Nonetheless, we'll continue to hang with it and give you any updates as things continue to change. All right, so 36 minutes, 15 seconds into today's flight tests. You're seeing some flat movement here on the ship. If you've been following along, we have essentially lost attitude control on the ship at this point. It is suborbital, so it's still headed to the exact same trajectory as before. We were not able to get that payload door open and deploy those nose cones. We've been dealing with some leaks on the ship. This is also what led to that loss of attitude control. So at this point, we are kind of in a spin, and we are also going to be skipping that Raptor relight. If you've followed through the history of this, something similar happened, different cause but same symptom, back on Flight 3, where we weren't able to maintain attitude control in orbit. And so we're going to skip the relight of that Raptor engine while we're in space. We are going to still proceed with entry, but as we are not able to control the attitude of the ship, as we get into entry, it will enter in whatever orientation it is in at the time, which does not bode well for the ship's heat shield, as we're not going to be essentially aligned the way that we want to do for re-entry. So it is definitely coming down, but our chances of making it all the way down are pretty slim. So we'll still get as much data as we can. We're still getting live telemetry, live views. The team made the call to do what's called passivate the vehicle, so we're essentially venting all of the remaining propellant overboard, and it's going to make an uncontrolled re-entry. Important to note, this is a contingency that is planned for, and we clear the zones where these entries could take place. So we're not going to come down exactly where we would have had nothing happened, but we do clear a tremendous amount of space out in the event that we run into this. We understand that there are always risks, essentially, with these flight tests, with the hardware, but we don't really accept any compromise when it comes to protecting people.
And it is one thing to note is we will actually still re-enter in our planned airspace zone, which is good. That is exactly what we planned for. You know, we do plan for, if something does go a little bit off nominal, that we have enough airspace cleared out for situations just like this. And another thing to note is that Super Heavy did fly for its second flight today. It first flew on Flight 7, and it made it all the way to our shutdown of all the engines and stage separation, getting ship into its suborbital trajectory today. It did ignite its 13 engines, but it did demise at that point. We did plan to fly it back down to Earth at a higher angle of attack, and we do expect it to stress the vehicle a lot more than what we've seen previously. So it's not unexpected that we did lose the booster before we got to the actual landing.
Yeah. So we're gonna continue to hang out and see if we get any updates on ship. It does look like we might be getting some video back soon. There we go. We are entering uncontrolled, but again, we're entering into an airspace and a sea space that is cleared and monitored in advance of launch and before we get to this phase.
And with the views that we are able to see, you are seeing a lot of that plasma build up. During re-entry, we do expect the vehicle to see about 1400 degrees Celsius, and there you can see the flap feeling that temperature there, a little bit melting away. But as we expected with the spinning of the vehicle, we are no longer controlling the attitude of the vehicle. So this is now, at this point in the test flight, it is expected to see it begin to demise a little bit on its way back down to Earth.
Yeah, and so we'll stick with it for as long as we're kind of getting any reach back from the ship as it starts to make this re-entry. But yeah, so it's re-entering actively right
Yep.
now. And again, we did do what's called passivation. So you essentially vent all of your excess propellant overboard before you hit the atmosphere. That's a safety measure we can take on the ship while you still have contact with it. So that was done. It's now coming down in the predetermined hazard area that was cleared ahead of flight. Not controlled, so we're not going to get all of that re-entry data that we're still really looking forward to. This is kind of a new generation of ship. It has different flaps, improved heat shield, a whole lot of things that we're really trying to really put through the ringer, as there's a whole lot we still need to learn before we get to kind of the next step that we're hoping for, which is going to be that ship going orbital and eventually coming back here. Getting through one of these fully is going to be really important. It's not going to be today, but we are just going to stick with the ship, see what else we can learn as it makes its way through the atmosphere and brings an end to the 9th flight test. So we'll stick with it.
If you're just now joining us, we did have an on-time liftoff. We did have some incredibly stressing objectives today. The Super Heavy booster flew for its second flight. It first flew on Flight 9 and made its way to take ship all the way up to stage separation, doing its second flight ever, which is pretty incredible. We did lose the booster on the way back down, as we did fly it back down at a higher angle of attack. So as expected, we did have it demise on the way back down.
Yeah, we were able to get all the way to that landing burn, though. So we made it through that higher angle of attack. So a lot of great data that's going to help us improve those future booster flights.
Yeah, we did do the directional flip, and it worked.
Yep.
It was actually
Flipped
a great
right
view
direction
that we saw. And then ship continued, 6 healthy Raptor engines in the beginning of its flight, making it all the way to SECO and coasting for quite a while. We made it to the expected time that we would open up the payload door. Unfortunately, the door did not open as we expected it to, so we did not deploy the 8 satellites.
Yeah, we ran into a couple of issues once ship got there, but I can tell you it was a pretty crazy moment for a lot of the people that were standing here for ship to make it there. It's been a couple of flights, but it was really exciting to see. Ran into some issues on orbit. We weren't able to deploy the Starlinks. We eventually lost attitude control, dealing with some propellant links inside of the ship. And we did lose attitude control. And just to confirm, we did lose contact with the ship officially a couple of minutes ago. So that brings an end to the 9th flight test. So still a lot of work to do, but really big moment. Chris, how's everybody doing over there? What's the vibes, man?
Yeah, you know, I mean, it's a test program, and that's what we're here to do. We're here to learn, and that was definitely the vibe and the atmosphere here. Would have been great to see ship get all the way through its objectives today, but with all of that data that came down through the system, we're definitely going to learn, and we're definitely going to fix that and push forward. Also, great to see the responsible engineers here in mission control, talking with the flight control team, talked about how it's great having that expert knowledge on console to be able to go to at a moment's notice. And that really helped us make the right decisions in orbit today when we decided to passivate the vehicle. So we will be here looking forward to Flight 10 and some success on future flights.
All right. Well, obviously, congratulations to everybody that poured so much time, effort into getting this rocket off the pad. The last 2 months have been an absolute gauntlet for a lot of people, and we're continuing to learn more about this ship, about this rocket. We are trying to do something that is impossibly hard, and it's not always you're not going to reach it in a straight line. We said there's going to be bumps, there's going to be turns, but seeing that ship in space today was a hell of a moment for us. So congratulations to every single person who put time, effort, sweat, anything into that rocket.
Yeah, this is exactly the way we're going to learn, iterate, and iterate over and over again until we figure it out. So thank you to everybody for tuning in.
And we will see you back here for Flight 10. Thanks for tuning in.